Righto, everybody. We are going to get underway. May I firstly thank the climatic conditions of Te Waipounamu, the South Island, which is attempting to provide you with a sense of all of the different kinds of water we have. We may well be getting a little flurry of snow down to about 100 metres or so. So for those of you who were anticipating some kind of mildly subtropical climate, surprise! It's Aotearoa, New Zealand, where we just really love to mix it up with things. I think it is now snowing to sea level not far south of here. So if you were a little bit like me and looked out the window this morning, went, that seems good, and then walked out of the hotel and immediately shrank into a small ball of slightly frozen human flesh and went back inside, you're not alone. Welcome to today. Hopefully everybody met some new people yesterday, introduced themselves in a way through their particular water bodies. There's a couple of people here that I've worked with for many years who once again castigated me for the use of the word swamp. They say it's a wetland. Say it's a swamp. It's actually, for those of you who will know, Whangamarino, it's it's the second largest wetland in the country where I hail from. Ramsar International Site of Ecological Significance and home to one of my favourite flowers, the little Cordibus karzai, the swamp helmet orchid, grows nowhere else in the world other than in this tiny little patch of wetland. If you're into orchids, if you're into wetlands, and you've got some time in the North Island, you won't see the orchid. In fact, nobody knows where it is. It's actually, you're not allowed, if you're filming it or photographing it, you are not allowed to show the location or how you've got there, because if you're familiar with the kind of the greed and the fanaticism of the orchid collectors, they will travel from all over the world to hunt down this little flower. So it's not only critically endangered, it's totally hidden. So that's by the by. I was basically filling time for some of our guests to get in. So if you weren't here yesterday, here is the Wi-Fi information. I know many of you are from abroad as well. If you need to use the complimentary Wi-Fi, that is the code up on the screen. If you haven't already got it, feel free to grab a photograph of that. It may well be on your app as well, which you would not be able to access, I suppose, if you didn't have the Wi-Fi. So, if you haven't got the Wi-Fi, get the Wi-Fi. The app, all of the information is on the app that you require. Also, if you're using it to connect with people or to interact with others or to post things, there are prizes available for people who do that through the course of the event as well. We would not be here without our premier partners, and I do really just want to thank each and every one of them. As I said yesterday, conferences like this, large or small across the world, are very difficult to put on, and they do very much rely upon the support of some very generous sponsors. So a massive thanks to our Conference and Expo premier partners, Citycare Water, Fulton Hogan Water and Hines, to Veolia and Neura, and our IWA-ASPIRE premier partners, Aurecon and Xylem. What about a round of applause for all of them? We do appreciate it. Our regulatory partner, I sat through a couple of excellent papers that they presented yesterday. We do very much appreciate Taumata Arawai, the Water Services Authority, and we have a swag of other sponsors as well. There they all are, sponsoring various individual things, including the dinners that we have tonight, the wonderful welcome function last night, the coffee carts and various other things. What about a round of applause for each and every one of them? Right, I'm going to make this very quick. We have got the two dinners tonight. There is the Downer Gala dinner that is occurring at the Wolfbrook Arena, for those of you attending that. That is about a 15 or a 20-minute drive from here, okay? There are buses that are going. Details will be on the app, but that is not happening at Te Pai. That is happening over at Wolfbrook. If you are attending the IWA Cultural Dinner, that is happening here. Te Pai. I should have figured that out. It's on the app. But here's the most important thing. If you have a ticket for those dinners and you are not going, there is a wait list. They are the most sought after tickets in town. So don't think that you can put them on some kind of Trade Me or platform and sell them for a massive, you probably could sell them for a profit, but it would be better that you went to the registration desk and say, unfortunately I can't make it, and they will sort out getting that ticket back from you and allowing someone else to go. Likewise with the site visits, if you are booked for a site visit, and you now cannot attend, those are oversubscribed as well. So if you could let people know, that'll free the space up for somebody else. All right, I am going to relinquish the stage. I'm going to welcome the wonderful Annalisa on. Annalisa will introduce our various speakers, and throughout the course of this as well, she will introduce some of the videos from our sponsors. So please, from Atom Consulting, a round of applause for Annalisa Contos. Kia ora, Annalisa.
Kia ora. I'm Annalisa Contos, and I come from the lands of the Darramurrugal people in Australia, and we are sea people there. And I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands both on which we meet and on which I live and work, and to pay my respects to elders both past and present, and also to the youth of today who will be the elders of tomorrow. I'm really excited to bring you the panel session that we've got and the two fantastic speakers that we have. So I would first like to introduce Katherine Richardson, who will be joining us over Zoom. She is a professor of biological oceanography at the University of Copenhagen, and she's a leading expert on Earth system science. She's a core developer of the Planetary Boundaries framework and currently leads an interdisciplinary research centre on ocean, climate and society. Her work focuses on the links between the water cycle, climate change and biodiversity loss in shaping sustainable futures. Please join me, even though she's online, in welcoming Katherine.
Thank you very much for that, Annalisa, and good morning, everyone. I'm really sorry I'm not with you, but I hope you will understand that I didn't feel I could fly to New Zealand when I wanted to talk about Earth resources and sustainability. So I hope I'll be able to get my message across without actually physically being with you. I think we're living in very, very exciting times. Every society has an understanding of its relationship with the rest of the world, and occasionally a scientific understanding challenges that way of thinking, and a whole new understanding evolves. You can say that happened in 18. Oh dear. All that hard work to make sure this works, and it's not. Okay. This happened in 1859 when Darwin really shocked society. He took the carpet right out from under society by saying, you know, we just like every other organism are products of evolution. We're not something finer that God made after everything else. We are products of evolution. That took a really long time for society to accept. Those of us who've learned evolutionary theory in school kind of think, well, we would have jumped on Darwin's train at once. But, you know, that's probably not true. It really took a long time. It took the carpet right out from underneath the economic paradigm of 1859 because very many people didn't think you could have economic growth or stability if you didn't have access to slaves. So it was a really big shock to the system. Now, I think, unless we live in Kansas, most of us have accepted the fact that we are an organism just like all others. But I think society is in just a big is under in the midst of just as big a change in our understanding at the moment, in that we are beginning to accept and realize the fact that we actually, just like all other organisms, belong to an ecosystem. And you say, what will, you know, ecosystem, what's an ecosystem? In biology, we define an ecosystem as being a group of organisms that are in contact with each other in a physical environment. And we have a global market that puts us in contact with every other person on this planet and every other living organism on this planet. So the entire earth is our ecosystem. And I think we began to realize this once we got these pictures from space of the earth. And we all know these pictures, but we very seldom stop to think, what do they really show us? And if you look at this picture, you can see the most obvious thing is what's not there. There's no umbilical cord. Okay, of course, there's not an umbilical cord, but what does it mean that there's no umbilical cord? It means that when we've used the resources that are here on Earth, we're not going to get any more. It also means that we can't really get rid of waste. Even as a marine scientist, I'm totally disgusted by the discourse we're having in society about plastic in the ocean. We've been using plastic since the 1950s, knowing full well that it's basically non-degradable in nature. That's why we like it. And we've had this picture since well, this one's from 72. The first ones came in 68 that show very clearly that 71% of the Earth's surface is covered with ocean, and there's no umbilical cord or pipe that's going to take the waste away. So, where did we think the plastic was going to go? This isn't rocket science. Of course, it's in the ocean. How could it take 60 years to make that, for that to become obvious to us? Now, there's another thing here. At the moment, one goes around and says, "Oh, climate, climate, climate," and climate is the same thing as sustainability and climate, and we just can solve the climate. But there's nothing very special about having a climate. Every planet and every other celestial body in our solar system has a climate. It's just a question of how much heat energy from the sun does it get, how does it move around, how much is stored near the surface of that planet, how much leaves it again. That's what dictates climate. It's the energy balance. There's also nothing very special about having elements. They're just left over from the Big Bang. But on most of the planets, the elements are very inert. That is to say, they don't react with one another. On Earth, they do very readily. And why? Because there's life. It's life that makes this planet unique. And everything that life needs to survive is already on this planet except energy. But you and I aren't clever enough to use the sun's energy directly to survive. It has to go through plants. So even the energy that life needs is generated here on Earth. Now, what we know about the Earth is that, in its history, is that for the last 3.5 billion years, ever since life evolved, it's been the interaction between the energy balance, or what we call the geosphere, and the non-living, the energy balance, climate, and the non-living elements. There's the geosphere, and then you have the biosphere, which is all living organisms. And it's been the interaction between these two that has controlled the overall conditions on Earth. And if something major happened in one or the other of the spheres, then there were total change of the conditions on Earth. Photosynthesis evolves. We've got oxygen, we've got an ozone layer. Plants evolve, green plants, we can take CO2 out of the atmosphere and cool the environment. Over here in the geosphere, we have tectonic plates that move around. And yes, once there were palm trees on what is now the Antarctic. And the poor old dinosaurs got a meteor in their head 63 million years ago. That changed everything. But it's this interaction between the two spheres that controls the conditions on Earth. And that, of course, means that the biodiversity crisis is at least as important as the climate crisis. And in fact, it worries me more, because when we get control over our emissions, and we do have the technologies that we need today, we haven't made them pay, we haven't made it totally acceptable to, or behaviorally to do it, but we can. And when we do, it'll take thousands of years, but the energy balance on Earth will go back to one that doesn't have a fingerprint of human activities. But every time we lose an organism, it's gone for good. And that frightens me. We can never leave we can never not have a human impact on the biosphere. Now, within the last maybe 150 years, a third force has evolved that can change the overall environmental conditions on Earth. And that, of course, is us. We don't do it directly. We do it by changing the geosphere, the energy balance, climate, or through changing the biosphere and processes there. And it's this recognition that we humans have the potential to change the overall environmental conditions on Earth that we call the Anthropocene. So when you hear of that, it's simply a recognition of the fact that we are acting as a quasi-geological force in the Earth system. And our force is increasing. So when we talk about sustainability, it's all about learning to manage this relationship with the planet. And if we're going to manage our relationship with the planet and not have overwhelming impacts on the system, then we have to be able to define, what are we trying to manage? And in terms of environment, this sustainable development, the environmental component of sustainable development is simply ensuring that demand for the Earth's resources are within the supply. And here in Denmark, if everybody lived as we do, then we would need 4 planets and the resources of 4 planets. And the same is true of many other of the well-developed countries. The social component, of course, is how we want to share the Earth's resources, not only among humans, but also all other living organisms. Now, if we want to get our demand for the Earth's resources to within the supply, we have to know how much we have, how much is there. What's the bank account? What do we have in the bank? And that's what the planetary boundaries are all about, is trying to provide guidelines for, or guardrails for, how much impact of the global environment is too much from our side. I will start out by saying, as I explain the planetary boundaries, that one aspect of it is actually subjective, in the sense that we are normative, in the sense that we argue that it would be unwise of humanity, of humans, to knowingly do something that could change the overall environmental conditions on Earth. Why do I say that? Well, it's because here you look at, this isn't actual temperature, it's a proxy for temperature. It's over Greenland, so it's not global. But these jumps here are like 10 degrees. This is the last 100,000 years, are like 10 degrees. And believe me, if the temperature was changing that much over Greenland at that time, it was changing everywhere else as well. So you can see the climate has been incredibly volatile. A lot has happened. Our species came onto this. We evolved in our current biological form something like 200 to 250,000 years ago. So our ancestors and about 10 other humanoid species lived through this. Well, that is to say, we made it through, the others did not. So all the others went extinct. We went down to very few reproducing individuals, something like tens of thousands, which isn't very much. So we were really lucky to get through the eye of the needle. And everything that we associate with modern civilization evolved during the last 12,000 years. We're talking Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, Neolithic Revolution, written language, everything that we associate with modern technology or modern civilization developed in this period. We know of no biological reason why it couldn't have been earlier. And many anthropologists think that it was this stability that you can see here. This is temperature we have here. And the temperature during those 12,000 years before we started to change it varied by plus minus a half a degree. Plus minus a half a degree. And now our politicians are saying, well, 2 degrees, but by the way, we're on our way to 3. But plus minus a half a degree. We don't know what a world that's 3 degrees warmer will look like. So we know for certain that our civilizations can thrive under Holocene-like conditions the last 12,000 years. We don't know for certain that we can thrive under other conditions. So we say in the planetary boundaries, our normative approach is that we say, okay, it would be very unwise of us to do something that we know could change the environmental conditions. Now, the most important reason why it's so stable right now is the fact that the Earth's orbit around the sun is very circular. But the people who study the Earth's orbit around the sun say there's no reason to expect that to change for the next many thousand years. So if we're going to change the overall environmental conditions on Earth, it'll be something we do. So then we go in and say, okay, well, what is it in this complex adaptive system that is the Earth, that's our ecosystem? What are the important critical features that actually control what the overall environmental condition is? And we arrive at 9. The most important being climate and life, biodiversity, climate, biodiversity, biosphere integrity, climate, because this has been the interaction that's been most important in determining conditions. But there are 7 other things, including freshwater change, but also land change, novel entities, that's putting things into the system that wouldn't be there if we weren't there. It's plastic, it's synthetic chemicals, it's GMOs. Effect on the ozone hole, air pollution, acidification of the ocean, and changing important geochemical cycles. These are all things that we do that operate through either the life or through climate and can change the overall conditions on Earth. Now, there's some interesting points to look at on these. And one of them is these three over here, including water, are all things that we take out of the system to survive, to eat, to get energy, to get our water, and so on. All organisms do that. The other six are all about waste. Nature doesn't produce waste. Here, using these, we're in agreement with, or we're in good company because every organism is doing that. None of the other ones are doing this, leaving waste in the system because the nature has evolved other organisms that break down bodily waste and so on. I think that's an important distinction to make. Now, we've had three different papers in the Planetary Boundaries series where we're developing this framework, and the more understanding we have, the more the framework has to develop. Our latest paper that came 2 years ago, and by the way, now has been downloaded almost 700,000 times. So this is a topic that's this is a narrative which is becoming very it's picking up speed. And we set the boundary. We set a boundary here. We say, how much can we push these 9 different features? How much can we push them without running a risk of changing the overall conditions on Earth? And you can see here that for 6, and now some people say 7, that ocean acidification has crossed as well. 6 or 7 of these, we've crossed the boundary. That doesn't worry me in the sense that in the 1990s, we were on the wrong side or very close to the wrong side with respect to the ozone hole. Now, thanks to human dedicated political effort, we're on the right side. And so being on the wrong side in itself is not a major problem. It's increased risks, but you can think of the boundary as being something like blood pressure. If your blood pressure is over 120/80, it's no guarantee you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke, but it means that the risk of changing of having one of these issues is greatly increased, so we bring it down. And a lot of people, a lot of scientists look, are you absolutely sure you've got the boundaries right? Well, no, we're not. How do we set the boundaries and go back and try and say, how did these particular processes work under different climate conditions and so on? So, I can't put my hand on the heart and say there's something absolutely critical about these, but you can look at all 9 of these and say, oh, I can imagine a world where the climate was so changed I couldn't, or I can imagine the world was so changed with pollution that we couldn't be here, or I could imagine you can go all the way around. For all of them, you intuitively know there must be a boundary. And when you compare what we found in 2015, all of the ones that were transgressed in 2015 are even more transgressed today. So that's what's really interesting, not the fact that we're on the wrong side of the boundary. Now, because this is a water community, I'd like to focus a little bit on what we've done with water and why we think it's so important to have in the framework. Firstly, you can look at it and say, there's an awful lot of water on this planet, and the amount that we're playing with is pretty small. It's really this less than 1% of the total. Can it really make a difference what we're doing there? And there we believe that the answer is clearly yes. When you look at the role that water plays in terms of changing the humidity in the atmosphere, cloud formation, all of these different processes that we have on here, it's incredibly important for establishing Earth system state. And therefore, we actually go in and look at blue water, which is removing, open water from the system. And we look at green water, which is the root water and so on. And if you look at blue and green water in relation to the blue and green water in relation to the planetary boundaries, you can see how it links into all of these different, the biodiversity, the climate, the land system, the aerosols, the ozone. You can, well, there's not much ozone, but otherwise there's a lot of, and the novel entities, there should be, because water transports novel entities and can be a reservoir for novel entities. So you can call water a sort of an integrator, as it were, of the different planetary boundaries. Now, how did we go about setting a boundary for water? Well, we simply just, we looked at the last part of the Holocene from like the 1600s onward, and we looked at the envelope of variability in terms of dryness and wetness of these areas, or discharge. The green one would be root zone soil moisture and discharge. And then we went in and said that the boundary control variable is the percentage of land area on which either the root zone moisture or the discharge exits the envelope of variability that there was in the last part of the Holocene. And it looks like this when you look at green water. Here you can see this is the pre-industrial variability range, with the median in black and a 10-year running average in red. And you can see how it's changed in recent years. And we place the planetary boundary here, arguing that we're on the wrong side of the planetary boundary now. If you look at blue water, you see a similar sort of picture, and where we, again, are outside of the planetary boundary. So the take-home message that I have here, or messages that I have here, is, first of all, there's critical pressure which is increasing on Earth system processes as we speak. And it's simply not enough to focus on climate. You guys are used to working on water as only a local resource, and it needs local management. But in fact, water also plays a critical role globally as well as locally, and it needs to be managed with some respect for that global role, because water is an integrator of the planetary boundaries. It's important for climate development in terms of clouds and so on. It's the bloodstream of the biosphere. It's a reservoir for novel entities, and it's a transporter of nutrients. And all these roles need to be managed in order for us to envision a society in which we live within the planetary boundaries. And nature tells us what will happen if we don't respect the fact that the Earth has biophysical or planetary boundaries. I expect that all of you with your backgrounds have at some point in your career been in your studying career, have been in a laboratory where you've been given a little a bottle with some media in it, and you were to put an organism, a little organism, usually a photosynthesizing one because it had color, and you were to put it in and see what happened. And it started out growing very slowly, that we called the lag phase. Then there was an exponential growth rate. We called that the exponential phase. Then it began to run out of resources and went into what we call the stationary phase. And at the end of the day, it died. It died because it got poisoned by its own waste products. Now look at humanity. We've had our lag phase. We've just had our exponential phase. Most demographers agree we're going into a stationary phase. And the question is whether we can prevent ourselves from being poisoned by our own waste products. Ecosystems that are well managed behave differently. Organisms usually don't die out. Yes, there are extinctions, but that usually happens when another organism comes in that does the job better than the first one did. It's like the guys that made wagon wheels for the horse carriages got replaced by the guys who made rubber Dunlap wheels for cars. For the most part, organisms persist in ecosystems, and they do it because ecosystems are sustainable, circular economies. And that must be the ultimate nature based solution, and one in which water plays a very important role. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Katherine, for a really fascinating introduction into planetary boundaries and the challenges that we have ahead of us, particularly while we're here focusing on water, but thinking about how our local interactions with water have implications on a global scale and across all of those planetary boundaries. And for setting us that challenge about how we run sustainable ecosystems, and we certainly don't want to be the dead organisms in the bottle. So I think there's a lot of challenges that have been set for us as we look at the plenary today. So thank you very much for joining us. Certainly staying up quite late to present your views for us. So please join me again in thanking Katherine. As we've mentioned, these events don't happen without our sponsors, and so now we will have a sponsor video from Veolia.
Water and the mana of water. We must care for it when we take it, we must care for it when we use it, and we must care for it when we put it back into the receiving environment. And that's the mana of water, and that's what mana OTY has us focus on as an industry and of course as a company.
There is a perception in New Zealand that we have an abundance of water. Yes, we do have a lot of water around the country, but the source water for drinking water, the quality can be variable depending on where you are in the country. Behind the scenes, we have a number of professionals that take a lot of effort and pride in producing safe drinking water.
Serving our communities, making sure we're providing safe drinking water. You can see it in the workmanship, you can see it out in the field. They're really engaged and really inspired by just knowing that, yes, you know, this is what we're doing for our customers, this is what we're doing for the environment.
Oh, every day we're doing repairs, we're fixing something every day, and it's good to help someone out every day. It's good. I don't know who the someone is, bro. Like, it's just any customer, any person, a random person. It's someone I don't even know, you know, just helping someone is good.
By protecting the environment, we're protecting our health. Kiwis love the rivers and lakes and oceans. We do so many activities out there, so we really need to make sure that the environment is just safe for them.
Our focus areas are people, community, the environment and business, and they're looked at in that order. So instead of the traditional approaches and just solely using an engineering approach, is to move forward and look at the principles of Te Mana Utawai, which has us look at what we do today, what impact does it have on the future.
So Katherine set out for us the planetary boundaries, and now we have the challenge about, well, what does that mean? How do we apply it? So our next speaker, Alison Collins, who's the Department Chief Science Advisor at the Ministry for the Environment, leads work on how to shape the evidence into policy and decision-making to support environmental stewardship. A key focus of her current work is understanding and applying environmental boundaries and the limits that we have, what's at risk and what we need to do. This thinking underpins the Ministry's work in environmental reporting, policy reform, and the future-focused approach to environmental management. So please join me in welcoming Alison as we look at how to translate that planetary boundaries framework into the New Zealand context.
Thank you very much for the invitation to talk. I feel very honoured to be here, and to be honest, a little bit overwhelmed. It's quite a big room, and I've prepared a presentation which I'm probably going to rush through very, very quickly. But I'd like to thank the previous speaker for setting out the planetary boundaries. And as Annalisa said, I'm going to try and translate that into how we understand the boundaries in New Zealand and how we can manage them. Now, you might not expect an environmental scientist to talk to you about financial management, but Katherine, our previous speaker, talked about the fact that we have a balance account with nature. And she also said that nature's been telling us we're crossing boundaries. And I'm in a total agreement. We have been hearing that from nature, but I don't think we're very good at listening. So I'm going to describe the crossing of boundaries in a way perhaps that will resonate with people, because we're all worried about our bank accounts and our finances. And certainly with cost of living crisis, we're thinking about that a lot at the moment. So I'll talk a little bit about the global guardrails and how they translate to New Zealand's local ledger, and how evidence can help us shift some of those liabilities into assets. Now, hopefully I can work this. So my 3 take-home messages for you are that planetary boundaries, environmental reporting, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and evidence really provide the guardrails. They, as Katherine said, identify how close we're getting in terms of risk. So that's the context. The science is really important. Regulatory work, which is what we do at the Ministry for the Environment, provides sort of some of the national direction and some of the information about limits. So that's the rules of the road. But actually, it's our everyday choices that really matter. They're the things that keep us on track. So I don't know who's in this room, but I suspect there are scientists, councils, engineers, communities, and all your choices really determine outcomes. So that's a really critical thing. So New Zealand has translated view of planetary boundaries, which highlights how some of the national pressures or global pressures that Katherine talked about intersect, so climate, land use, nutrient flows and fresh water. But we also have an environmental reporting programme that is led by the Ministry for the Environment along with Statistics New Zealand. And we gather information basically around the 9 boundaries or sort of domain areas every year, from data from a wide range of sources. We have it peer-reviewed, quality assured, and then we bring it together into reports. And in April this year, we released our Environment 2025, which was a 3-year synthesis of what's happening across our domains, across those boundaries, and what we're picking up. Just next week, we're going to be releasing our Marine Environment 2025, which is the 6th monthly domain report, this time focusing on the marine environment. So these reports, for me, really are our risk radar. They show us what's changing and where risk is really material for us. And if we're going back to that financial management metaphor, if you don't track what's happening, if you don't track your depreciation or your risk, then you do really put yourself into a dangerous area. So I'm going to explore a little bit about what the reports have been telling us to date, with a particular focus on water. So, based on our Environment 2025, the report that I just spoke about, 5 realities showed up in terms of water. And there'll be things that will be on your balance sheet. So there are things like too much water, too leaky, too poor, too little, and too changeable. So each represents a different kind of reality, operational, for financial, reputational liability. And I'm going to walk through briefly each of those and then think about how we can address some of those risks. So let's start with too much. Extreme weather events, as we know, are increasing in frequency and intensity. And here in New Zealand, I'm not sure how many people are visiting from overseas, but those of us in the room that are from here will know that we've had a series of really quite significant weather events in the last couple of years. 27th of January 2023, Auckland anniversary, we had a huge deluge in Auckland. And then just a few weeks later, I think it was the 11th of February 2023, we had Cyclone Gabrielle bring huge destruction and impact. In the Auckland anniversary weekend event, there were 245 millimetres of rainfall in 24 hours. And our stormwater systems were simply not designed for that intensity. It's like filling a bath full of water, the taps are running and the drain's blocked. And so the result, homes were flooded, infrastructure was damaged, and there were hundreds of millions of dollars worth of recovery costs. And this is what happens when design standards assume yesterday's climate. It's a liability that compounds with every event, and it's only likely to continue into the future. Another thing that comes up in our environmental reporting is around sort of our leaky infrastructure. We know that Wellington Metro loses around 27% of its treated water through leaks. It is down from 32% because of targeted repairs, but without universal metering, we're still guessing. And every litre lost is an asset you've already paid to treat and pump. And so the cheapest source of water is the one that you've already got, if you can keep it in the pipes. So really thinking about fixing before you build. So this is another area of risk that's manifesting in our environment. So too poor. Quality and leakage are two sides of the same coin. They both appear on the balance sheet as a risk. Leakage writes off treated water, and then water quality issues carry health, regulatory and trust exposure. So our Environment 2025 reported that in 1 year alone, we have more than 3,000 untreated wastewater overflows. Most recently, we've had drinking water issues, particularly in Gore, where the nitrate levels trigger public concern and media attention. And while the evidence is still evolving in terms of what this means in terms of health, the reputational and trust impacts were immediate. And this is a classic One Health issue. Environmental signals or issues become health and social risks. And these are, so again, showing up on our balance sheet as a risk. And I put here, when water carries risk, it doesn't stay in one box on the balance sheet. So as I say, it's coming up in environment, it's coming up in health, it's coming up in our trust. Now too little. So drought is no longer a rare event, it's becoming a regular feature of our climate reality. Our Environment 2025 highlights the increasing frequency and severity of droughts, particularly in our eastern and northern regions. Over the last decade, we've had the 10 warmest years on record. We're seeing reduced river flows and groundwater recharge, and that's affecting our ecosystems, our agriculture and urban water supply. And in some catchments, water scarcity is already limiting irrigation, prompting restrictions and increasing competition between uses. So again, this isn't just a climate issue, it's not just an environmental issue, it's an operational risk. And every dry season compounds infrastructure stress, economic loss and community vulnerability. And it really is a loss of service. So again, another thing that's flagging on our balance sheet. Also linked with climate is too changeable. So again, our Environment 2025 reported from Treasury actually that estimates 250,000 people and $145 billion of assets are exposed to sea level nationally. That's a huge figure. So this isn't just about future projections, that's about what's already at risk, our infrastructure, our homes and our hopes. Many of you will know South Dunedin is one of our most at-risk areas in New Zealand. So that's further south. It sits on low-lying land with shallow groundwater. And as sea level rise, groundwater rises too, reducing the ground's ability to absorb rainfall, flooding, before the sea defences are overtopped. I think you might have heard, perhaps yesterday, the South Dunedin Futures Programme has released a comprehensive risk assessment with a range of potential adaptation futures from managed retreat through to raised infrastructure and a number of hybrid solutions. This isn't just about building higher stock banks, it's about where we put infrastructure in the first place. And the way that I like to look at it is that adaptation isn't just engineering, it really is geography. It's thinking about where we should live, where we should invest, how we should plan. And where you build matters just as much as what you build. So again, this is a risk that's showing up. Location is very much a risk exposure. This tends to be a little bit gloom and doom, but I promised at the beginning I would explore how to flip the ledger, so how to make sure some of these liabilities are addressed and we start looking after our water assets. there are three things that can currently come up within our environmental reporting programme as things that we can do. One is about measuring what matters. So when we can't see risk, they become significant risks. So being able to meter, have sensors, have shared data sets, help connect choices to outcomes. So that's really, really important. A second thing is around the guardrails. So whether that is having the evidence, but also the regulatory settings. So at the Ministry for the Environment, we have a programme around national direction, which looks at limits, values, attributes, and bottom lines to make outcomes very visible and comparable. At local government level, the Water Services Act has a real focus on supporting resilience, affordability, transparency, and climate adaptation. So these are all regulatory settings that can help us stay on track. And then the other thing that I think is really important is that climate change has been such an amplifier at the moment that we can't think about, as I mentioned a number of times, designing for yesterday or even designing for today. We have to design for tomorrow. There's going to be a new normal, so that's treating extremes of scarcity, flooding, nutrient pressure as standard operating conditions, not exceptions. So reflecting back on my twos, my too much, my too little, too poor, too leaky, too changeable, I'd like you to think about on your balance sheet, what's at risk and what is your balance sheet going to look like in 5 years' time? What's the biggest water risk you face? What evidence do you need to diagnose or fix it? How will you track progress, not just for compliance, but to build trust? And I would just return to my key messages. So again, planetary boundaries, environmental reporting, the science really provides the context and the guardrails. Regulation helps give us, regulatory settings help give us the rules of the road, but actually the most important thing is the choices every day that we make as councils, as engineers, as communities, as individuals to keep us on track. So I'd like to end there and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alison, for a fascinating talk that really speaks to us about how to take that, the planetary boundaries framework and think about what that means and how we can live within our means, how we apply that as the balance sheet. I particularly enjoyed the point about when water carries risk, it doesn't stay in one box on the balance sheet. And so there's a lot of thoughts for us that we will carry into our panel. But before we do that, again, we'll have a couple of videos from our sponsors to acknowledge their great support for this event.
Through our Three Waters management, we are kaitiaki of our wai. Behind the scenes, all across the country, the people of City Care Water ensure the safe passage of wai, so your whānau has safe water for life, when and where you need it most. From the water you drink, to the water you bathe in, to the water you play in. Keeping your community safe and healthy, and our water infrastructure running smoothly 24/7. It's a team effort, it's dedication, it's emergency call-outs and rapid responses. It's late nights and early mornings to ensure continuity of supply that you can rely on. It's innovation, discovering new, smarter ways to manage the network, water quality and resources, with results right at your fingertips. It's the right people, at the right time, and with the right skills, who are committed to putting in the mahi. Te mana o te wai. Join us in protecting our precious taonga for the future of Aotearoa.
Value for generations to come. For almost 100 years, we've been thinking generationally, planning for future generations by maximising value today. The many faces of value. Care. 2 decades after we designed and built it, and with multiple enhancements since, Nelson's water treatment plant will be a world-class facility for decades to come. Readiness. Across New Zealand, valve exercising is extending the life of valves, improving decision-making, maintenance scheduling and health and safety. Responsiveness. When a major slip breached the lines from Dunedin's St Leonard's Reservoir, the team had the system in operation again within 48 hours. Capability. Taking just 10 months, a new dissolved air filtration system added 20 million litres per day to Wellington's network for the summer of 2024-2025. Continuity. A diffuser maintenance system designed and built by our civil division ensures aeration even while diffusers are cleaned for 100% continuity. Teamwork. Fulton Hogan's collaboration framework Intertwine is the foundation of award-winning contractor-client relationships like that with Hastings District Council. Capacity. Connecting 10,000 properties to Auckland's water network every year, we are the face of water care services in this critical area. These are the many sides to the value we bring to New Zealand's water sector. We deliver this value every hour of every day, and for generations to come.
We move now to our panel session where we will have 4 speakers come and explore the ideas that we heard through our keynotes. So I would like to introduce firstly Liz Root, who's a seasoned sustainability specialist with over 19 years experience working in the built environment. She brings a systems thinking approach along with a comprehensive understanding of sustainability across the infrastructure life cycle. Datuk Abdul Kadir has more than 40 years of industry experience in the water and sewerage sectors. His main expertise is on conceptual and strategic business planning and management across the water cycle, including risk management and optimisation of operation costs. He has a vast exposure to engineering consultancy, public listed companies, government-owned National Water Asset Company, and he's currently chair of the regulator SPAN. Dr. Karina Jin is the Provost Chair Professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the National University of Singapore. Her research specialisation is in the area of water quality and ecosystems processes, with a particular understanding on the fate and transport of emerging microbial and chemical contaminants. And our final panellist is Yang Villa. Yang has been working in the sector for 13 years as a business developer. He's on a mission to develop the leadership potential of as many young leaders as can be fitted into a lifetime, and he's won numerous awards for his leadership and environmental championship. Yang works to enable the water sector innovation that promotes development. Infrastructure and financing and technology are means to this end, and his job is to help channel these where they can make an impact. Please join me in welcoming our panel. So Alison spoke about the work that New Zealand is doing to define the safe operating space for the country. And yet New Zealand is not alone in operating outside those boundaries. Liz, what changes can we make to get below them?
Just a small question then. Kia ora koutou. So it is a big question and it's a big challenge. And yeah, really clearly set out by Katherine and Alison, the challenges ahead of us.
And you've got 3 minutes.
Quick. So I've got 3 things. I think one of them is actually, and it does hark back to some of the discussion Katherine had, is around going back to ecosystem thinking. The second is around following the money and finding the opportunities we have there. And the third is remembering that small steps are better than no steps. So the ecosystem thinking. When we were at school, we all learnt about the water system. But we start working in water and we're delivering this project over here or that project over there, and we forget that we're working within nature system. And so I think there's the opportunity for us to bring ourselves back to that system thinking and what we do. And hopefully with the new local water done well, as we begin to think in catchments, that will provide the opportunity for us. And I think an example of that is up in Auckland, where we're now looking at opportunities for making space for water. Following the money, when we're spending more money, we're typically demanding more of nature. We're making more impact. And so if we can understand where we're spending our money, understand the impacts that we're having, we can then prioritize and look for opportunities. And I think one of these is, as touched on by Alison around Wellington Water, as a bit of an example, is looking at demand management and actually thinking about, okay, you know, let's look at demand management, let's understand, let's only take the water that we need, let's only process the water that we need. And finally, as I said, there's no one silver bullet, but if we all take one step forward, those one steps all add up, we can make a change.
Thank you. So while we talk about demand management in high-income countries, Yang, what are the implications for middle and low-income countries?
That's a tough question, Annalisa, but thank you. Let's look at it this way. In the past, high-income countries industrialized and developed when there was virtually no upper limit to economic growth. And growth was unfettered, unregulated, and unlimited. But things are changing, and now with the knowledge of planetary boundaries, we are essentially putting a limit to what we can achieve and what low and middle income countries can achieve, given the current trajectory of economic growth. Unless, of course, we find ways to decouple economic growth and development from resource intensity. And that is easier said than done. And the first thing we need to do is to acknowledge that this situation is just unfair and unjust. I'm not saying this to point fingers. We're saying this because we need to ensure that any solution that we implement moving forward is fair and equitable for all. But indeed, this acknowledgement is at the heart of just transition, as Professor Katherine discussed earlier. And having said that, I think that all countries, regardless of income level, have a responsibility, a commensurate responsibility to reducing resource intensity and decoupling development. And no one is exempt, but responsibilities are commensurate. And keep in mind that the pressure on low and middle income countries is far greater, because even as they have to accept this cap, this limit that we are now imposing on everyone, they still have to use up resources to lift millions of people out of poverty. And that is still a development goal that not only low and middle income countries must be responsible for, it's the responsibility of everyone. And that's where the role of development institutions like ADB comes in. Because I still think, in my opinion, development banks is still a great mechanism to channel money from high-income countries and pull that together and channel that to where development is most needed, and that is in low and middle-income countries.
Fantastic. These changes, though, that we're going to need to see to live within the planetary boundaries aren't going to happen without a regulatory driver. Kadir, what are we going to need from a regulatory perspective?
Thanks, Annalisa. I think I'd like to wish first. Hope I get it right. Tēnā kotoa, more ora. Okay, I heard a lot of things. Just now, the presentation talked about manage relationship with the planet. Then I heard about unregulated, the low income, and about demand management. You see, where we come from, we look at regulation is just another thing called invisible architecture that determines our system serve people and the planet. That's one. And where Malaysia is concerned, we have undergone through nearly 20 years. We have a regulation that has evolved beyond compliance. And it's now a system that is a leadership tool that connects science, policy, finance, and community well-being. So with that, we have recognized it as not just an economic commodity, but it's part of planetary life support system. And with that, I would like to introduce three shifts that is essential. One is the integrating planetary boundaries into policy. We must regulate within ecological limits, meaning abstraction, discharge, pollution controls are not just by technical standards, but by carrying capacity, where the demand comes in, of our basins, the river basins. And Malaysia approach aligns licensing, tariffs, with river health and source sustainability, ensuring every cubic meter taken is balanced with ecosystem renewal. And this is a must. Then, second step is about balancing affordability and sustainability. Planetary health cannot be achieved if communities cannot pay for safe services. So such, where we are, SPAN as a regulator, we apply a progressive tariff glide path, where efficiency, innovation, and inclusion are rewarded, while the poor, we're talking about the poor just now, remain protected, and this ensures financial viability without breaching social equity. So last is driving the circular water economy that is regulating beyond linear treat and discharge models, enabling wastewater reuse, slash to energy, and industrial reclaimed water. This not only conserve resources, but cuts greenhouse emissions and pollution footprints. So these reforms are underpinned by real-time data, governance, through where we are going to force forward. We are developing the National Water Command Center, which integrates river, source, and supply data. It's our planetary dashboard for water. So ultimately, effective regulation is about stewardships and ensuring we hand to the next generation rivers that still breathe, aquifers that still flows, and communities that still trust their taps. So to life, to water, to our shared planet.
So I think that idea about economic stewardship being vital is a really key point there with regulation, which brings me then to Karina with, we need obviously really good science to underpin policy. So can you speak a bit about the work that you're doing in that area and how that extends beyond nations to the regional work that needs to happen?
Yes, so thanks, Annalisa. So let me share with you two examples how we manage our science across boundaries as well. So first, in the area of modeling water quality and ecosystems. And here we do it in the context of trying to protect our coastlines in response to climate change and sea level rise. And as you know, the ocean has no boundary as such, but we countries do have boundaries. So when we try to model water quality and ecosystem processes, we know that these are influenced by hydrodynamics, the circulation, the mixing of the waters. But in order to get very good and accurate models, we really need to have data, boundary inputs from the region, rather than just at our local scale. So for this, we need to look at cooperation between different countries. We are now trying to model, for example, the South China Sea, working with different countries and trying to see how we can, collect the data, but also share models so that we have consistency in the way that we have data outputs, and this will help us in the data interpretation as well. The second example I wanted to also touch on is antimicrobial resistance, which I think most people know is like a ticking time bomb in public health. So here I think WHO has done a great job in initiating the global surveillance program, which many countries are participating in, including my country. And here, we not only adopt the One Health approach, where we have to look at the different sectors and try to work together, the public health sector, the environmental sector, as well as the food and agriculture sector. So it is a challenge because it is very complex, but I think it's a start. We see that at a national level, we can try to do this surveillance, and then we can contribute to each other's efforts, and then eventually get a global surveillance and track this very difficult problem of AMR.
It's really important that this research then is translatable coming from that science into policy. And Alison spoke on how we had to manage for the new normal. So Kadir, what does that mean then for regulation? What changes are we going to have to see as we step into this?
Yeah, if you look at the regulatory part, we are changing and transforming ourselves. We're also looking at, now we are in the second stage of transformation. We have undergone our restructuring of water industry. We are now going towards the water sector transformation 2040. That's all undergone 4 nation plan. But for future regulation will be adaptive, circular, and data-driven. And this is where it will cover the water, food, energy nexus. And we are now shifting towards outcome-based regulation, where tariff approvals and incentives are tied to real results. Example, we talk about non-revenue water, we are targeting to be below 25%, and expanding the reclaimed water for the use of industries, data centers. The latest information that we have, the demand for the data centers is about 750 billion liters per day that we are going to face, and how we're going to convert the wastewater into renewable energy. That's another challenge in the industry, looking into solar, methane, hydro, mini hydro, hydrogen water, then talk about steam, and this kinetic energy. So we have to embrace the digital regulation. Towards this, what they call, we're launching our National Water Command Center. It's a single hub connecting the IoT sensors, monitoring, AI, and looking at predict risk to river health and supply continuity. And that's where we're changing the landscape to what we call predictive regulation, anticipating problems before they occur, not reacting after failure. And perhaps most importantly, the future regulation is about co-regulation, shared responsibility between the government, operators, and communities. So together we are shaping a model where regulation doesn't enforce, it enables transformation. That's where we are heading. Thank you.
And I think that shared responsibility between government and communities is really going to be important as we move into this new normal. Karina, as an island nation, Singapore's really been facing down this challenge of the water, food, energy nexus and how to manage resources within a constrained space. Can you explain that more?
Yes, so indeed, Singapore is very limited in resources. From the beginning, we have been a water-stressed country, but fortunately, our government leaders have had the foresight to plan many decades ago. So in the area of water, I mean, we have now got 4 taps. We have catchment water, we have imported water, and we use science and technology to get reclaimed water as well as desalinated water. But all this has been decades in planning and, the foresight of our leaders. So for that, we are, truly appreciative and grateful. But of course, we have other challenges. Now, one of our challenges that we faced is waste. So how do we convert waste to resources, waste to energy? We don't have much land. Our landfills are filling up. So now the push is to go for zero waste, do recycling as much as possible. And this is also reflected in how the government is constructing their treatment plants. For example, our newest treatment plant is, the wastewater treatment plant is right next to the waste to energy plant, so that the biosolids from the wastewater treatment plant can go directly to the energy plant or the waste to energy, and then we have a circular economy there. The other challenge for us now is, of course, coastal resilience in response to climate change, because we are an island surrounded by sea, and so we would definitely be impacted by sea level rise in the future. And all this time, I think the government has been very supportive of research, pumping funds into research proposals, making it very competitive so that the best solutions can come about from all over the world. And I think this is a very important aspect in driving our science and technology to an area where it can become very useful, very translatable to our country.
I think that really comes back to Kadir's point as well about how important it is that we're working across government, the industry and communities. And you touched on the infrastructure projects and how we're starting to bring circularity into that. So Liz, how do we bring that planetary boundary thinking into our infrastructure projects?
So I would say the infrastructure sector, generally we're a conservative sector. We're not likely to suddenly be transporting our water in mushroom-based protein pipes. The building sector can take those steps first. But there are small steps that we can take to make a difference collectively. I want to give a little bit of a plug to the Climate Change Special Interest Group of Water New Zealand. They've got some fantastic resources available on the Water NZ site. You may have heard, or some of you may have heard yesterday, the group talking about their embodied carbon guidance and some of the case studies and examples that we have here in New Zealand. We have projects taking their first steps, and what we need to do is learn from each other and appropriate from each other, and basically take all those steps. You know, you might have a project over here that's looking at low carbon concrete. You've got a project over here looking to reduce their waste. Let's get a project that does both those things, and let's just keep adding and adding to our portfolio so that we can deliver our projects with lower impact. I think as well, I just want to mention, as I say, the Special Interest Group reference PAS 2080. Great to have another code or standard. Publicly available specification 2080. It's a carbon management framework for infrastructure that came out of the UK. It talks about avoid, switch, and reduce. And that avoid is thinking about, you know, that first step. Do we need this asset? You know, if we're working on demand management, okay, do we need to build less? What are those opportunities before we move into that reducing impact? Also, just briefly, we've talked about nature, we've talked about the ecosystem, moving towards more nature-based solutions. We need to look at nature's resources and how we can work with them, not against them. And we actually see that in some of our non-water projects. Those projects that are looking to manage stormwater runoff and other things are now moving towards ponds and wetlands rather than pipes and drains. And we need to see more of that.
Okay. Yang, how are we going to be activating the youth as we're in this changes in the planetary boundary framework? And what are our responsibilities, you know, as the older people in the room about that, enabling the younger people to come and make those changes, but also that sort of demographic changes that we need to have happen?
I think it's, firstly, there's no old water professional, there's only senior and seasoned water professionals. It's funny you mentioned that because for us who are in mid-30s, we feel like we're just being pushed off the edge of a cliff after we turn 35, and now we're out of the young water professional. But I think it's very important to first acknowledge the climate anxiety that younger generations today are facing. It's real, folks. It's real. Talk to young people, and they have a sense of doom and gloom about the future. And let's not dismiss that, because it is something unique to the younger generations. And it doesn't help that sometimes our message to them is, it's now your problem, we're out of here anyway, so here it is, we're passing the torch, and therefore we're also passing the problem. As with any other kind of anxiety, I think the antidote to that climate anxiety is action. So if we are not bringing the youth in on the action, on your projects and programs, that is a big gap. And we can get youth to be more active. Firstly, it gives them ownership. Second, it gives them agency. And thirdly, it gives them a voice to get their own views included, but also it gives them practice for leadership and technical capacity that they will need for the future. And always remember that the leadership and skills that got us here today are not going to cut it for tomorrow. So talk to them and figure out what skills and leadership capacities do they need to prepare for the future that we created for them. So there's a lot to do with young people, but the first and most important step for those in the room is to talk to their youth stakeholders, and that begins with the young professionals in the room. So if there are any young water professionals, raise your hands. Are they in the room with us, young water professionals? Good. That's our work. Talk to them.
I probably wanted to expand on that a bit more as well, because there were some hands, but not, you know, the room's not full of them. And so I know you did some work as well with IWA and the leadership program, and just explaining possibly a bit more about that framework, about how we make sure that we are bringing the youth to the table, and not as a token activity, but as an activating activity.
IWA does this at several levels, but it's moving beyond just raising awareness and building capacity. IWA is also moving towards the next rung of the youth engagement ladder, as we call it, which is to give opportunities for youth to consistently practice their leadership skills. And that means getting on management committees of specialist groups. And I understand even with the interest groups within Water NZ, it's also happening. But at the very top of this engagement pyramid, engagement ladder, is institutionalizing youth engagement and leadership at all levels. And even in IWA, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there, but we're getting there. So where do we start? Again, talk to young people. What do they need? What kinds of competencies and skills do they need? Second, give them a chance to practice those skills. Don't just leave them as casual observers. If you relegate youth as observers to your projects and programs, they will become your first naysayers, and the loudest ones at that. They will shout on social media. But get them in on the action, and they will be your staunchest advocates.
Fantastic. So we've heard about how we are living beyond our planetary boundaries. And so in finishing up on this session, I wanted to ask what your call to action was as we went through. So starting with you, Liz.
Thank you. So remembering we're part of a system, one big ecosystem. Taking that best practice that we see on projects and turning that into business as usual, and actually using that as a foundation to do more. And then finally, just understanding that co-benefit. As we look for financial efficiencies in the work we do, we can understand the impact and look to reduce that impact and do better, one step at a time.
Okay, thank you. My turn. I may take a bit more. Sure. I think I want to have a spirit here to look at water. Water is just like a part of our planet. And regulation is how we keep the heartbeat alive. It's very important. And every liter that we abstract, every drop that we discharge, either pushes us closer to risk or pull us back to balance. It's about this demand management. And today, the message is clear. We must regulate within planetary boundaries, not beyond them. And that means setting rules that protect rivers before they run dry, recycling water, recycling every drop before it's lost, and pricing water in a way that is fair to both people and the planet. So where Malaysia is concerned, under our WST or Water Sector Transformation 2040, we are reshaping regulation from a compliance model to a stewardship model, where every decision is guided by science, data, and justice. And our national commitment to regulate today's water so we may safeguard tomorrow's planet. So our mission is no longer to enforce compliance, but to enable transformation. But we cannot do it alone. So no nation can act alone. The planet's boundaries are shared, and so we must be that must be our responsibilities. Let us build a community of regulators who see beyond borders, who treat water as one system, one trust, one future. You may put it in the Maori language. He wai kotahi, he ao kotahi, and he anamata kotahi. One water, one planet, one future, Maori oral. Thank you.
Karina? So I think most of you know about the 3 Ps, public, private, partnership. I'd like to propose another 2 Ps. So anyway, with the first 3, private sector, public sector, partnership. We have public sector oversight as well as private sector efficiency coming together, which is very important for our solutions. But my 4th P that I would like to propose is peaks of excellence, which comes from the scientific community so that we have excellent solutions for our challenges. And the 5th P would be people participation. And that is where we can get feedback from locals, as well as getting local knowledge, which can also help in these solutions. So that would be my take-home message, the 5 Ps, private, public participation, as well as people and, what was the last one? Peaks of excellence. There we go.
Easy. Talk to a young water professional today. Just one. And then mentor that person.
Thank you for that Fantastic message. So as we wrap up this session, I think we've covered an enormous amount of ground. We've heard about the planetary boundaries and how we are currently living beyond a number of those. And the call to action is around bringing that blood pressure back down. You know, it's not about debating where the edge of that boundary is, but we are beyond it. What are we doing to bring it down? We heard about the importance of water as running around many of those boundaries and the vital contribution that it makes within helping us meet a range of those areas and its importance in economic development and environmental stewardship. Alison spoke about how we could have too much water, how our systems could be too leaky, it could be too poor in terms of quality, too little and too changeable, and a real call to action about how we need to be planning for the future. And that's been something that we've discussed on the panel today. I think Kadir's point about we need the stewardship guided by science and justice is really important. We have these shared boundaries. We need to be working as governments, as corporations, as people, and across boundaries, across nations, because we have just one water, one planet, and one future. Karina, we just touched, I think, in the end, particularly on that people aspect. It is really vital as we start to think not just about public-private partnerships, but also that peak of excellence and the human capacity that we're going to need. And Yang, definitely that call to action for everyone in the room about how we are going to bring young people to the table and to have a voice, that it's not just a tokenistic effort. And I know that it's a debate that we have within our organisation about the idea of emerging leaders. And it's like, well, you can lead now. It's not, it's not that you've got to top off 35 to suddenly be able to be a leader, but that the younger people that are in the room can be leading now and actually have a vital role to play, because it is their future and they have those ideas. And then, Liz, the idea around how we're managing our resources. Do we need to be building it? How can we operate what we have better? Starting as well, that one step, the question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, that we do need to be doing something. Sometimes it can seem insurmountable, but also how we bring all the ideas together so that we can be doing carbon capture and a range of innovations within the one projects. And I think that challenge as an engineer to our conservatism is a good challenge for us, that we can't keep doing the same thing or else we're going to end up with what we've always got. And we definitely heard today that that is not sustainable. The Earth will still be here, but we will not. So I would like you to join me now, please, in thanking our panel for the incredible insights that they've brought with us. I've got gifts.
What about a round of applause for your wonderful chair as well, Annalisa? Congratulations. All right. Theme of the day, boundaries. Look, we have the sort of the boundaries, the physical constraints of the beautiful world we live in, but there's a lot of other boundaries. They're very artificial. Whilst some countries are defined by the geography, there's no shortage of boundaries that we have created over many years, and likewise boundaries around and gatekeeping around the likes of Western science. We're having a very hot and an excellent national conversation here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, around the empowerment of Mataranga Māori and Western science. I know many others as well, certainly the discussions around Australia. So if we do anything over the next couple of days while you're here, let's remember that a lot of these boundaries, we've just made them up. So get amongst it, meet some new people. Young water professionals, talk to your seniors. Seniors, talk to your seniors. There's always someone more senior than you. And one of the most important things about these, and we certainly realised this during the COVID years, is the opportunity for a serendipitous conversation. To be in the room with someone, to line up at the food, which is going to be over at Tapai, or as you wait to get into the cultural dinner tonight, over at Tapai as well, to turn around and have a conversation with somebody that you have not met before. And you never know where that conversation is going to lead. We've all been to conferences, we've all been to events where we've had a chance conversation, and many, many years down the track, we're still acting upon those words or that relationship that we have formed. So we're going to go to morning tea just slightly early. It'll give you a chance to walk across the not quite yet snowing it's only a matter of time. I'm really hoping for that you'll all get a chance to experience our, I'm going to say snow, but really it's just going to be just a form of sleet. It's water as well, across to Tapai where morning tea is. A reminder, if you are using the app, do make sure there's two conference streams. You've got the Waters papers and you've got the IWA papers, and you're more than welcome to attend any one of those that attracts your fancy. Have a look through the app and we'll see you there. Limes, Avon and Victoria Room are here at the Town Hall. Everything else is over at Tapai. Again, what about a round of applause for all of our excellent speakers. Go meet someone new.